to the Love Lab Podcast, a safe place to get real about sex. Whether you're a man, woman, single, or couple, this is the show for you.
We are your hosts, Kevin Anthony and Celine Remy, and we are here to guide you to go from good to amazing in the bedroom and beyond.
All right, welcome back to the Love Lab Podcast. This is episode 240, and it is titled How Chronic Illness Affects Relationships and How to Fix It. So we're going to be talking a lot about people living in chronic pain, and there's a reason why, which we'll explain in a moment. But I don't want you to view this episode as only from the perspective of someone experiencing chronic pain, because this really has to do with any sort of a long-term chronic illness that can potentially affect your relationship. So, the viewers and listeners to this show obviously know that I dealt with this with Celine, which is why she is no longer here. So I do have personal experience with this, as does my co-host today, who I will introduce in a moment, who also has personal experience with this and who helps coach people through this. Now, this is something that affects far more people than I think most people realize. And so, one of the things I always try to do in this show is do topics that, appeal to a large number of people. And so I try to stay away from things that are really super niche down, like things that are really like, wow, there's only a handful of people who have to deal with that specific thing, because I'm trying to just, help as many people as possible. But like I said, this affects way more people than you realize. And it can be a lot of different health conditions. And unfortunately, we have seen massive increases in the last couple of years. There are some specific reasons for that, which we will not go into in this show. But, when we see things like 400% increases in excess mortality, we know that something is happening. And so I have a feeling that this topic is going to be affecting more and more people as time goes on. And therefore, it's going to be more and more important for people to figure out ways to manage it and to still have healthy, amazing, beautiful relationships while they are going through these things. For some people, it may be a short period of time. For other people, it may be the rest of their lives, and they're going to need to know how to handle it. So that's going to be today's show. I think it's going to be really interesting, and I think it's going to help prepare people for something that could very well be the most challenging thing they've ever experienced in their life. But before we get there, short message from our first sponsor, which of course is me. Do you want to join the secret club of men who are great in bed? Then check out Power and Mastery. It's the most complete sexual mastery training for men. Whether you want to have harder erections, last longer, or increase your sexual skills, there is something for you at powerandmastery.com. As you know, this is the men's sexual mastery course that Celine and I created, and it is truly life transforming. I mentioned this last week on the show when I did this ad, but I actually I get, feedback and response from people all the time in regards to this course. But the most recent one I got was from a guy who said he was dependent on Viagra for a decade. And after taking this course, he no longer needs it. I mean, if there's a better testimonial out there, I don't know what it is. So powerandmastery.com, go check it out. And of course, that's not the only thing it will teach you. There's tons and tons of other stuff in there. Okay, so as you might know, because I've already sort of mentioned it, and if you're watching the video on YouTube, you see her sitting here next to me. I have a special guest host with me today, Emily, who is going to help us dig into this topic. So Emily, first of all, say hello to everybody and tell them about yourself.
Hello, everybody. I'm so happy to be here. My name's Emily Shaules, and I am a coach that works with women primarily who have invisible illness. And that's, as we'll get into, pretty much anything that's a chronic condition, whether it be physical, mental, spiritual, emotional. But I've had a long and varied career path, I started off as an attorney myself before my own health crashed. And then really for the first time ever got into natural health, things like that. And so went on to become a professional actress. I started my own energy bar company. And now I'm the executive director of a wellness center here in Southern California. So I'm kind of got the 9 lives of careers going. But my heart is with coaching because it's affected my life so personally. And so I know that if my experience can help someone else feel better in any way, then it was worth it.
All right. Yeah, that's quite an interesting life you've had so far. There's multiple iterations of you,
I'm
apparently.
like Madonna.
Keep reinventing yourself. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I know a little something about that too.
Well, and chronic illness actually plays a part into that. If you are in chronic pain or have an illness that doesn't allow you to fit into the kind of the pre-molded capitalist like 40-hour work week, you have to get creative as how do you provide for yourself and take care of yourself if your body doesn't allow you to necessarily do what most other people are doing to make money.
Yeah, well, first of all, the 40-hour work week died a long time ago. It's more like the 50 to 60
Yeah,
to 80-hour work week these days. But I would also say that, some of the things that we'll talk about, some of the strategies and things, even if you're not suffering from chronic illness and you are in one of those, 50, 60, 70, 80 hour, like this will help you also.
Absolutely.
So that's important. So we want to start with just a few statistics, and the statistics here are really focused around chronic pain because that's more of your expertise. But we could have made a massive list of other statistics if we wanted to incorporate other types of illnesses. But just this is just to sort of give you the tip of the iceberg, so to speak, right? So the first one is the CDC estimates that 20% of all Americans experience chronic pain. So for this one condition alone,
yes,
chronic pain, up to 20% of the population suffers from it.
Yeah, that's 50 million people.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah. So, and the point here is that, again, talking about the idea of this affects a lot of people. I mean, 20% of the people are affected just by this one thing alone. Now you throw in people who maybe have disabilities due to numerous different things, all the people who are going through cancer journeys or, any of that stuff. Like you realize there are a lot of people and a lot of couples who are struggling with how do I manage this and still have a relationship?
Absolutely.
So, but why don't you read the next one on the list here?
Oh, yes. Women are more likely to experience chronic pain. The technical percentage is 38% opposed to 30% of men. But I've heard statistics, especially for fibromyalgia, which is a chronic pain condition, of up to 80 to 90% are women. And they haven't been able to figure out why. I have my own personal theories, of course, but when I got into coaching and I thought about who is my audience, I thought of chronic pain, but then I came on the term invisible illness because I felt like that encapsulated more of people who have not only chronic mental conditions, things like that, but it's for those people who we quote unquote look normal. So people treat us exactly how they treat everyone else, not realizing they're in pain possibly every moment of every single day, but yet they look like there's nothing going on.
Yeah. We don't really have time to cover in this show, but I would love maybe when the show is over, I'm very curious to hear your personal idea as to why that is. And one of the reasons I bring that up is because, as somebody that has lost a partner, I'm now meeting and talking to a lot of other people that have lost partners. The majority of them are men who have lost their wives. And it's not just because I'm a man. That's just like a lot of people reaching out to me that they're also men. And it's just interesting. There is definitely something going on in our society that is targeting women. And I think there's multiple somethings going on in society that are targeting women. So curious to hear your theories on that, but that is not for this show. That's a whole other rabbit hole. All right. Let's see.
I might sneak it in there somewhere.
Yeah, you can drop hints. That's fine. I love to drop little truth bombs in this show.
Yes.
All right. Last statistic, more than 8 in 10 patients in chronic pain experience severe depression.
Absolutely.
And, you know, I would say again, this goes for any sort of long-term chronic condition. I mean, even going through the journey with Celine, like a huge part of my job, aside from the day-to-day stuff, was just trying to keep her positive and motivated
Yeah,
because it wears on you.
absolutely.
And it's like, if you think about it, really, anything else that's going on in your life, like let's say you have a bad day at your job, like your boss was giving you a bunch of shit, and you know, you come home, and then you know, a lot of people tend to take that out on their families, right? They
Mhm.
don't mean to necessarily, but they do. And so you realize that, you know, when your mental state, when your emotional state is not in a good place, it's really hard to then show up in your relationship the way that you want to show up and the way that you
Absolutely.
need to show up. And it's hard to, yeah, to nurture that relationship and really have it. So it's important to understand that when people are going through these journeys, that they are often experiencing things like depression.
Absolutely. And it's not just, I mean, obviously, if you've been in pain for 5, 10, 20 years in some cases, of course. I mean, it's almost logical that there would be some depression there. But there's also the physiological and biological reasons that link those two. So if say your gut biome is completely off and that's what's causing the physical pain, guess what? That also is going to cause depression. And so they go hand in hand. But there have been clients of mine and me myself who have at times almost wished that we had a more acute, almost more dangerous illness, so to say, just so that it would be over, or that it would be something that we could pinpoint and say, oh, that's it. Okay, so now we have a protocol that we can go down, instead of just, oh, I literally had a doctor when I was 25 tell me, you're going to be in pain the rest of your life. Get used to it. What do you do with that? Like, that's not
What
helpful.
what you what you do with it is you throw it out the window, because a lot of
Exactly.
these doctors have no idea what they're talking about. When a doctor tells you anything, like, so, you know, I don't want to rip on doctors, because there are some really great doctors
There
out
are.
there, but you have to understand that the doctor can only give you an opinion based on their limited knowledge and experience.
Yes,
And so when it comes to something like this, all they can tell you is, I don't know what's going on. I don't know how to help you. And therefore, you're just going to suffer with this for the rest of your life,
exactly.
according to them. That doesn't mean that you can't find somebody else or some other protocol, or find your own thing that could potentially help you. But
Absolutely.
you know, I mean, there are so many stories out there about doctors like, you have 6 months to live, and the person like 10 years later is like,
Yeah,
"It's 10 years, 10 years later, doc, I think you were a little wrong on that one," right? So
absolutely.
they tell you these things based on their limited knowledge and
Yes.
perspective. And although some of them like to pretend they know everything, they really don't. All right. So those are just a few stats to sort of give you an idea of how prevalent this is, and how, you know, so one, how many people are potentially dealing with something like this, and two, like we talked about with the depression, how it leaves the realm of just the physical thing
Absolutely.
and starts to get into the mental thing. So I think you probably have a pretty good idea at this point, at least, how pervasive it is and
Yes.
how serious it is and how difficult it can be. So, okay, how to deal with it if you're already in a relationship.
Mhm.
And that's probably going to be the main crux of the
Sure.
conversation today, is like, because this isn't always true, but most of the time when people get together, they're not dealing with something,
Mhm.
you know, really difficult and big like this. And then as time goes by, things happen.
Right.
Now, if let's say you got married, right?
Mhm.
If when you got married, you did those sort of traditional vows, and you did this, you know, till death do us part, in sickness and in health,
Oh,
and all
I
that
did.
kind of stuff. Unfortunately, in today's society, we don't, like, people say that they go through those vows, but as soon as stuff gets hard,
Yep.
one or the other cuts and runs,
Yep.
right? And so, did they really mean that? I strongly suggest you don't say those vows, or take them, unless you really mean them. And then at some point when this happens, like, this is when the rubber hits the road, right? Like this is when you really have to step up
Right.
and live up to
The vows.
the vows,
Yes.
right? So I think that's how it happens a lot of times. People get together, if they're young or healthy or whatever, and then life goes on and things change, right? So now they're in a situation where they're in a relationship with someone they've been with for, at least a significant amount of time.
Right.
They've developed depth. Maybe they're married, maybe they have kids, maybe they have businesses together, and then something happens to one person. How do you deal with it?
Right. How do you deal with it without creating a field of resentment or bitterness around the situation? That's the big thing, because people can grit their teeth and get through, 50 years of marriage, but are they miserable? Are they happy? Are they actually helping their partner, or are they sitting there blaming them for what's not going on with their own life because their partner's sick? So there are a lot of it's not necessarily even actions, it's the intention and the energy behind the action that makes such a difference, which I know, it's what you talk about every every episode. So, but specifically in this dynamic, to be able to assure your partner that you're going to be there for them in a loving way, no matter what happens. Someone who is dealing with a chronic illness and especially doesn't know what it is, doesn't know if they're going to have it for the rest of their life, they are used to people leaving, of hitting their threshold and saying, I can't deal with this anymore. To be able to actually say, like you just said, I'm not going anywhere, in and of itself can relax their nervous system, their body, everything, because now suddenly the biggest fear, which is usually behind I'm going to be in pain the rest of my life, their biggest fear is I'm going to be alone and in pain the rest of my life. And so to take that out of the equation is medicine in and of itself.
Yeah, and that is a very valid fear, right? And that's, from day one, when we got the diagnosis, it was the first thing I said to her is, we're in this together.
Yeah.
So you have to do that. So that was step one: assure your partner that you are there for them and that you will be there for them. So what comes after that? What do we do next?
Well, really developing a strategy for how you're going to deal with it. And your life is going to change if your partner either, already has an illness or has contracted an illness. You have to accept the fact that it's going to change the relationship dynamic. And like I said before, you can either go into resentment or bitterness over that, or you can say, hey, something changed. And so now what? How am I going to live my life from this moment on, instead of going back constantly to, oh, it was so much better before. It was so much better, because it's in the past. You have no access to it anymore. So
that is true, whether you want it or not.
Exactly.
Right. And the tendency so much in today's society is the grass is always greener on the other side. Like, hey, everything was great and it was awesome, but now that it's not great, I want to just bail and go find great again.
Yes.
Right. But that's just not the way life works.
No. And if you're doing that, then you're constantly in a breadth versus depth situation, where if you can, the jewels and the gifts of going deep with someone through dark times, through hard times, through the worst of times, it builds such a resilience in your partnership. They've done studies of couples who have lost children, and it's pretty 50-50. It either destroys the relationship or it makes it stronger. And a chronic illness can do the same thing. And so it's really just a decision you, as the partner who maybe doesn't have the chronic illness, needs to make. Like, am I going to stay and dig in and really be here for this person and accept all the beauty and the gifts that this relationship and this situation have for me and for us? Or am I going to go look somewhere else? But you're going to take yourself with you.
That's right. Wherever you go, there you are.
Exactly.
Right? Famous book by John Kabat-Zinn. And we'll get to a few more ideas towards the end of this list here to help you deal with that. But the main point that you're making there is life has changed and you're going to have to
Roll with
accept
it.
it, right? And there are ways, especially if you think outside the box, to have whatever needs that are not being met that don't mean you have to break up or move on or disappear or whatever it is that you do,
Yes,
which we'll get to.
absolutely.
All right, so next one on the list. This one is something that Celine and I definitely talked about quite a bit as well, which is bringing additional resources to help you manage both the condition and the day-to-day tasks.
Yes, this is huge because there are so many resources out there for people with chronic pain, whether it's, you know, a pillow for different positions during sex, whether it's having someone come in and help out with some household chores or switching up, you know, routines with regard to that. There are so many different resources if you really get creative that necessarily don't even cost money, but what it does is it sends a message to your partner who is suffering with chronic illness that they are worth you getting creative and you changing up your routine and you doing things that you might normally not do. They're worth that. And I think, you know, going into the depth of why women maybe suffer for this more is that those deep underlying feelings of unworthiness that we have. And I mean, everyone has those, but it's a human condition. But to be able to say, hey, let's switch it up and make it fun. Like, how do we get creative with this so that it's not a chore, that it's not you watching your partner like suffer through all of these changes? Again, it's what is the energy and the intention that you're doing these things with that is going to send the message to the partner that you're worth it. I'm happy to do this. We're in this together, and we're going to make this fun.
I like that idea of letting them know through that type of action that they're worth it. That's something actually I wasn't necessarily even thinking about when reading that. I was thinking a little bit more practically in my mind about, like, because, you know, especially, and it depends how much care the person really needs.
Yes.
You know, like how functional are they in the day to day, and with Selena and I in the last 2 months, she was not very functional at all. And so it required a lot from me. And so that's when the discussion started coming in about how do we get some help? Because how do I run 2 businesses, take care of her, make all the meals,
Absolutely.
take care of the house? Like, how do you there aren't enough hours in the day to do all that. So you gotta come up with strategies. You gotta figure out ways to make things easier.
Yeah. And there's such a range, like you just said, which is why I don't necessarily in this conversation go into so many examples because so many lives are different. I will say meal delivery services, I'm the biggest proponent of. If you can find one that works, whether it's, you know, you preparing some ingredients that they send or them sending you pre-made stuff, to take the shopping, cooking, cleaning out of the equation can be such a gift, especially if it's, you know, an organic, really healthy meal service, because now suddenly you don't have to worry about, oh my God, you know, my naturopath told me I need to get this, and this into my diet somehow, and I'm already at my limit. And so now I go in and order.
Yeah.
And you've got to buy food anyway. So like there are ones that are affordable, but it's a huge thing, especially if you have a partner who works outside of the house, who doesn't want to have to come home from a job and then go into meal prep for that. If you're having a bad day, to have things that are already pre-made is a godsend.
Yeah, that's a great idea. There are quite a few services. We never did that. I made all of the meals, but what we did do, you know, Celine loved to cook and she loved to go shopping for groceries.
Yeah.
A lot of people are like, oh, grocery shopping is such a chore. But she wanted to be able to select everything because she was into cooking and like the ingredients were important to her. So she was really sad that towards the end she couldn't actually physically do it. So we found a service where you go online and you still get to choose everything that you want. And you have a physical shopper in the store who's communicating with you in real time while they're picking things and asking you questions. Do you want this instead of this or that? And so we did that for months in order to, because I just like, I simply don't have time. Like,
Yeah.
when am I going to get to the store? Are you kidding me?
And it's the perfect example of working around what you want out of this. Like I've never wanted to cook. It's just never been something I've been into. But if Celine was, then to find that service as opposed to a meal delivery service, creative, wonderful, and it got the job done.
Yes. All right. Next one on the list. Make sure the intimacy is still a priority. Okay. One of the things that we would always hear from people not dealing with these types of things is how hard it is to find the time, right, to do all of this stuff. And yet we would always say, okay, look, that's an excuse, right? Like
Absolutely.
you need to make time for it. And so I can only imagine if regular people who aren't dealing with something like this are having problems.
Yes.
Like, what's going on for somebody that is dealing with this? So,
Yes.
yeah, maybe, I mean, do you have any? I have a few things that we did to share, but I'm wondering if you have something you
Absolutely.
could share.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's really based in communicating with your partner and seeing what their experience is from a day-to-day basis so that you can find solutions that work for them specifically. For example, I still have chronic pain and my pain gets worse as the day goes on. So, uh, like Nicki Minaj, I am a huge fan of morning sex or Cardi B, sorry. And so, because I feel good then, I feel like I can be at my physical best, whatever that is, as opposed to, a lot of times society's kind of programmed us of like, sexy time is at night. And it's like at night, I'm in pain, I'm exhausted. It's usually not the time for me that I'm really feeling like I want to be intimate with someone. And I've had partners that they don't really get that. It's so ingrained of, well, no, I'm going to take you out for dinner and then we're going to have sex. And it's like, well, if you could break out of that pattern and realize that like morning would be awesome for me. And then I'm going to be in such a better mood and it's going to be such a better experience. That's one example. Again, noting that if someone has limited energy, an intimate time, that might be like their only big activity of the day, so maybe having it on a weekend or something where they don't have to worry about kids or work or something like that. It's hard to find a blanket statement since people deal with so many different conditions. But it is more about asking questions and just being curious as to, what would work for you? What would work best for you? Let me try that.
Yeah. So number one, of course, is you have to make it a priority. And
Absolutely.
this is true whether you're dealing with, a chronic illness or not, or you just have to make intimacy a priority. But I love the piece that you shared too. And this is definitely one of the things that we were making sure, later on the journey is exactly what you said, which is you have time, you have energy like now, right?
Exactly.
And honestly, I recommend that for people that are not dealing with chronic illnesses as well, because so many of our clients would say stuff like, well, I want it to be spontaneous and, I want it to be this and I want it to be that. And they put all these parameters around how it has to be. And then you sit there and go, okay, so how's that working out for you?
Exactly.
How many times have you actually had sex?
We don't
Right.
live in rom-coms like as much as we want to. That's not real all the time. And especially when you're dealing with a condition that affects your mental health or can, through depression or anxiety, it, getting those good chemicals in your brain, the oxytocin, like all the things that being intimate can create, it's I would argue it's more important for people who are chronically ill to have intimacy. And what I love about what you guys have taught is the not having a finish line. not having an idea of an expectation of where this has to go, that this has to end in intercourse, or this has to end in
Yes.
orgasm, or this has to end in mutual orgasm at the same exact time where we're gazing, gazing into each other's eyes. Like just having 30 minutes of whatever feels good. That's enough.
Yes. So you beat me to it because that
Sorry.
was no, that's great. I love that you brought that in. But that is one of the things that I was going to bring up is first of all, make it a priority. Second, make sure you take advantage of the moments when you do have the energy and the time, right? And then the third one is to not have expectations about how it has to be or how it has to look or what it has to end up in,
Yes.
right? Just appreciate it for what it is in that moment. And sometimes it will be that amazing lovemaking, multi-orgasmic experience. And other times it will be, hey, at least we connected.
A foot rub. Yeah.
Yeah. We connected, we embraced each other, we cuddled, we did a foot rub, we maybe touched some genitals a little bit or
Something.
something, but we interacted in that way to keep the intimacy alive and going. And it's so important when you're dealing with something like an invisible or chronic illness that you've got to stoke that fire from time to time. Otherwise, it will go out.
Absolutely. And what you've said in previous podcasts of people who don't have chronic illness completely, and even more so relates here, of that warm up time, that stoking that fire, because you have to realize that if someone's in chronic pain, their pain signals and pleasure signals are offline, so to speak. There's something wrong there. And so to know that it probably will take a little longer to get someone fire stoked than it normally would, and be okay with that. And not because, again, that's one more reason that someone with chronic pain would be like, I'm bad, I'm not worthy of this, I'm broken. If you can be patient with someone and say, hey, we got all night, like we're not turning on Netflix tonight, so we've got 3 hours and we're going to take 3 hours, to just do whatever, again, will just cause the nervous system, which is, the root cause of a lot of these issues, to calm down enough that they can rise to the occasion in whatever way that means.
Yeah. Super, super important. I will also suggest that, again, even if you're not dealing with a chronic illness, that you turn off Netflix
Yes.
and you take 3 hours.
Yeah.
It's
Absolutely.
one of the keys to having a great sex life.
And this, again, I mean, I think we could preface every statement with, this doesn't have to be necessarily with chronic pain, but it's for everyone. But especially with chronic pain, especially if the woman is in the partnership, the one with chronic pain, knowing that there could be some emotions that we have to get through in order to get to that place where there's openness, that there could be, anger of, I just want to sit and watch TV. I've got no other energy for anything else. That might be a layer that you have to allow to bubble up and dissipate before something else can happen, instead of saying, oh, well, you turned me down, I'm leaving, I'm mad.
Well, so this is something we talk about on the show all the time, about the difference in time that it takes for, like,
Oh God, yes.
men just see some visual stimulation and they're like, I got an erection, let's go, right? And women are like, no, I'm nowhere near, right? So imagine that difference, right? And now you're dealing with some sort of chronic illness, times that by 10 or 100,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
And realize that you got to just slow it down that much more.
Yep.
Okay. Next, assume it will take someone with chronic. Oh, we just talked about that.
Yes.
More time and attention to relax.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's key, because if you walk around all day feeling like you are different and you are not as good as other people because your body is having these reactions, you're going to take that home with you. You can't. And so it's anything that your partner can do to just assure you, I'm here for you. I'm here for you specifically with whatever issues you've got. We're going to make it work because I'm with you.
Yeah. All right. Next on the list is use props, toys, etc. So this is what I was talking about earlier, where finding other ways to get your needs met, right?
Yes.
So if your partner maybe is not capable of participating in the intimacy the way they used to be able to, what are other ways that you can get those needs met? So maybe you can use some toys.
Yeah.
Maybe you can use some props. Depending on how open you are in your relationship, you might even be able to bring in other people to help that, whether with the two of you or getting your needs met elsewhere on the side. Just be careful with that, because one thing I do know is that when somebody is dealing with a chronic illness, they feel very vulnerable.
Yes.
So, even in a regular situation, people tend to feel a bit vulnerable and like, ooh, I'm gonna let him have a date, or let her have a date, outside. Like there's some kind of jealousy and that kind of stuff that can happen normally,
Absolutely.
which people in the poly world and the open relationship world spend a lot of time and energy just dealing with that, and they're not dealing necessarily with any sort of chronic illness. But when the chronic illness part is factored in, then you realize that they feel even more vulnerable. It's that what you were saying
Yes.
before about what if they leave, right? What if I am alone and in this situation, right? So you have to tread lightly on that one,
Yes.
but know that in the right relationship, with the right communication and the right reassurance, that is something that you could possibly do. Like if your partner is basically no longer able to have sex with you, right? And he or she knows that you have this need because you're still a human, right? Then they may be willing to allow other ways for you to get that need met.
Absolutely. The biggest thing is to really just go within and try and get your ego out of it. Whatever is being asked, like I've had partners that were so against using toys because they thought it somehow implicated them that they weren't man enough,
They weren't good enough.
and it's like, no, dude, I just I need help getting there. It would be, really getting any resentment and bitterness out of the equation and really focusing on your love for that person instead of maybe, any like hurt that might be personally affecting you, focusing more on them and their needs and your love for them in, a non-codependent way, of course, but,
Ooh, there's a key right there.
that's a whole other podcast.
Non-codependent way.
It's like 5 podcasts, but it's, yeah, I think I've made my point.
All right. So I will just sum that part up with just be open to new ideas,
Yes.
new ways to potentially get your needs met. Because if you don't, then there's a tendency for resentment, which is you mentioned earlier, to build up. It's like, wow, I'm putting all this time and energy in, all this work to help. I mean, I love this person and I'm doing all of this stuff. And yet at the same time, my needs aren't being met,
Yes.
right? The only way, especially if it's going to be a long-term thing, if it's, short-term, few months, a year, 2 years, whatever, you can kind of suck it up and get
Sure.
through it, right? But if you realize this is going to be a longer-term thing, you got to take care of yourself too, because
Absolutely.
eventually you'll burn out and you won't be able to care for the other person. And so you
Absolutely.
need to figure out ways that you can get your needs met in a way that doesn't harm the relationship. If you can do that, it will likely actually help the
Oh my
relationship.
God, without question.
Okay, so before we go on to the next bit, we need to take a short break for our second sponsor, which is me again. Are you a couple? Are your relationship and sex life where you want them to be? Are there changes you would like to make but just don't know how? Maybe you think there is nothing that can be done. I challenge you to make 2023 the year that changes. If you're not 100% happy with where your relationship or sex life is, then get help today and change your life. Go to CelineRemy.com/sex coaching couples. I know that's a mouthful. I did not create a shortened link. Link is in the description. Don't worry. All you got to do is go there and click on it. When you do that, you can schedule a strategy call with me to figure out how I can help you get your relationship, love life, and sex life back on track. That is CelineRemy.com/sex coaching couples. Link is in the description. All right. So we've covered some statistics. We've kind of laid out the scope of the problem. Now we talked about if you're in a relationship, how do you deal with it? The next thing is, let's say you're not in a relationship. just because you have a particular condition doesn't mean that you have to be single for the rest of your life.
Yes.
And in fact, it would probably be a whole lot better and easier for you, not just because somebody can help you, but because of the physical intimacy and the way that that will help you mentally, emotionally, and potentially physically as well, to be in a relationship with somebody.
Yeah.
So then the question comes up, well, how do you date when you have a chronic illness like this?
I'm so happy you asked, since I'm currently in that situation. I feel like I have very good real world experience with that. For me and for many of my clients, that is the situation, because chronic pain can be isolating, and you can self isolate, and realizing that I don't have to be 100% healthy in order to add value to a relationship. I don't have to wait until I'm healed to begin looking for a partner. That in of itself is a block that a lot of people need to get over. But then when you're on a date, is that something you bring up on the first date? Is that something you wait until you've made a connection with someone? For me, and this is just my own personality, I'm pretty much an open book. And so I will say little things in the beginning, letting people know, because I don't want to go down a path with someone who might not be able to handle it, and have us both connect and develop feelings for one another, and then suddenly the whole situation is apparent and that person can't handle it. I'm much more of a be honest, but I don't think you necessarily have to give a huge explanation of your entire health history on the first date, because I think that's really off-putting. And you're not there yet. I think it's a time to really listen to your intuition, really listen. Like, do you have compatibility otherwise? Do you have things that are in common? Do you want the same things in life? If someone is truly wanting like a triathlon buddy, yeah, you're probably going to want to swipe left on that one. You have to be honest with yourself there, because especially here in Southern California, on dating apps, there are a lot of men who are, it's like, it's all action shots. It's all like mountain climbing and hiking and all of this stuff. And you have to be realistic with yourself, that if that's what they're looking for, a partner to do those things with, and you're not able to do those things, save yourself the trouble and look for someone whose lifestyle yours can mesh with easily.
Of course, chronic illness or not, you need to look for somebody whose lifestyle will mesh with yours. Even more important in this one. And I would say, I agree with you. You don't have to go into like a whole health history in the beginning, but it is something important because it is a major part of your life. And so I do think it would be a good idea to bring it up in the first date.
Absolutely.
But all you really have to say is, hey, here's something that, is part of my life that I have to deal with. And here's basically what I can and can't do. And like, you don't have to go into a whole list, but like, you could just kind of broadly say, hey, I've been dealing with chronic pain since I was 25. I have my protocols for managing it. And my life kind of looks like this. Like, I'm okay doing this and this, but probably spending 3 days on a mountain climbing, expeditions, probably not going to work for me.
Exactly.
Right. So you don't have to go into a lot of deep details.
No.
Give them the whole story, but at least give them an idea of like, hey, if we did date, what would life look like?
Exactly. Like, for example, a previous partner of mine was very much into mountain biking, would go for like 35 mile mountain biking rides. But he actually didn't want anyone to come with him. That was his like alone spiritual time. So it actually worked out perfectly. He would go on those. I would be at home, and then he would come over and we'd have dinner and watch a movie, and he'd, relax, and I wouldn't have to go mountain biking. So there are ways. I'm a big believer that the universe, or whatever you call God, has ways of bringing you what you want. You don't have to say, well, if he's a hardcore athlete, that means he's off the table, and I'm doomed to be in a relationship with a couch potato the rest of my life. No, there are creative ways you can make things flow.
And not every hardcore athlete wants their partner to be a hardcore athlete.
Exactly.
Some do, but some don't. And interestingly enough, if they really are a hardcore athlete, then that means that they spend a lot of time invested in whatever sport it is or sports that they
Yes.
do. So that might actually be a good fit, because as someone dealing with a chronic illness, you're going to need more time for
To
yourself,
rest. Exactly.
right? So there is a possibility that it could line up such that, when he's out doing his things, you have your time to do your things.
Absolutely. And the biggest thing I just want to say is in terms of dating and when you bring it up and how you bring it up, I don't think there's a person on the planet who's going on a date that doesn't have some like big, dark, scary thing in the back of their mind that they feel is going to take them out of contention to be in a relationship, whether that's chronic pain, whether
It's
that's that
true.
you've got a kid at home, whether it's you're not doing well financially at the moment, whether it doesn't matter. We all have the big, dark, scary thing that makes us feel like we're destined to be alone the rest of our lives. This just happens to be yours. So just do it like you would do with any other big, dark, scary thing. Get it out in the open, talk about it, and most likely it's not going to be as scary as you think it is.
Yeah. And of course, you also know that the sooner you do that, the sooner you can find out whether or not this is a fit and move on, rather than investing weeks, months, years in a relationship only to find out later on that there's some major
Absolutely.
incompatibility. It's funny that you say that, because, when Selena and I knew each other for a few years
Mhm.
before we got together, and we always knew that there was sexual attraction there, but we kind of figured our lifestyles were so different that it probably wasn't a good fit for partnership. That's because we had these preconceived ideas in our heads about, who the other person was.
Yep.
And so it didn't have anything to do with physical illness or depression or anything like that. But I had parts of my lifestyle that I assumed were not gonna work for her.
Yep.
But I knew enough, at least anyway, to just get all that stuff out
Yes.
pretty early on. And I was truly amazed that every time I sort of let her into a new part of my world that I thought that she was not going to like, she was like, "Oh, that's really cool. I love that too." Right? So that can be like you said, everybody's got their stuff that they're holding back, and you're holding back because you think the other person isn't going to like that part of
Yes.
you. So, one, just know that there's a significant chance that they will go, "Oh yeah, me too. That's cool."
Yes.
And two, if they're like, "Whoa, no way," then you want to know that right from the start.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, and I mean, the gifts that come with chronic illness, I know that's kind of an oxymoron, but the women that I know, especially and men as well who have chronic illness, are some of the most resilient, dedicated people I've ever met. I mean, they really have the strength that it takes to live in our society under constant pain is extraordinary. I can't really describe it. And so to know that someone has that inner strength and that resiliency within them, that is a gift to bring to a relationship. That's not a detraction. And so to not think of yourself as this broken thing that's looking for someone to take care of you. No, you are a fully functioning, beautiful, worthy human being who's got gifts to bring to a relationship just like any other person does.
Yeah, that's a beautiful point that you made. And I think that is probably often overlooked. People
Mhm.
don't realize, maybe they were that strong beforehand, maybe they weren't, but by going through that journey, if you stay on the journey and you don't check out of this world, the only way you can do that is to get stronger.
Yep.
That's the only way.
Mhm.
So maybe that's something a lot of people don't realize, is the inner strength that is really there. Okay. So that's kind of how do you date? How do you bring it up? Let's take it to the next step now. So now you're dating somebody.
Mhm.
How do you then start to bring in the intimacy?
Yes. That's a whole other layer because, I mean, again, it always comes back to communication in my book. I think we have this idea that you are just going to walk into a room with someone and you're immediately going to know each other and what they like and what they don't like and what works for them and stuff like that. And I remember watching, I forgot who it was, um, but a gay man, and he was like, "Man, you straight people, you really need to learn from gay people because that's exactly what we do when we start an encounter. It's like, what works for you, what doesn't, what do you, and we just go through an entire questions. And most straight people don't. They literally just start kissing and then do things that they did with previous partners and hope it works. And
Cross their fingers.
yeah, and it's just not realistic. It's just not like the best intimacy comes from communication. Like, obviously you're not communicating the entire time, but like a little in the beginning, but especially if you have chronic illness, because it's going to save so much trouble once you go down that road. If you know from your own body that a certain position does not work for you, let your partner know so that they don't put you in that position. And now suddenly, like, you're not responding, so they think they're doing something wrong. And then, I mean, it's just this whole chain of pain that can be avoided from some communication early on.
Yeah, communication, huge, always huge, right? I highly recommend this in any, sexual encounter or intimacy, whether you're dealing with, a chronic illness or not. You got to communicate, like, what do you like, what do you don't like, what are your yeses, what are your nos, what are your boundaries, all that kind of
Yes.
stuff you need to be doing. But it's even more important, obviously, in this situation. I would also say, before we move on to the next one on the list, to just slow down.
Oh God, yes.
Because it's something neither of us put on the list, but it's coming to mind right now, which is just slow down. Like, don't expect that this is going to be like the last, one night stand date that you went on, where all of a sudden things just went from 0 to 100 miles an hour. And that was that, right? That's probably not going to happen in this situation.
And from the female perspective, waiting for the white knight who knows your body perfectly, knows exactly what to do. I know you guys have talked about this. It's a fantasy. Like, it is an absolute fantasy, because you are your own individual and you need to take ownership of your own pleasure and know that that's something that you need to be able to communicate with someone. And if you can't, for whatever reason, whether it's religious programming or you've never even experimented and you don't even know what you like, that's your job. You need to do that well before you can bring someone else in and expect it to be a desirable outcome.
Indeed. Next, we kind of talked about earlier in the show, which is take advantage of the right moments when they arise.
Yes.
So focus on good communication, slow down, take advantage of the moments when they arise. We also talked about using props or toys.
Yep.
That's also here. And then we have be and stay open-minded. So yeah, maybe the things that you're used to doing, the things that you've always done with previous partners before, maybe they're not going to work this time.
Or even with this particular partner.
Yeah.
Something might change. Something might,
this
develop.
Is something we say with women all the time, like from sexual encounter to sexual encounter, and sometimes moment to moment. Like, what was working just 3 minutes ago is not working anymore. This is why in coaching men, this is why I spend so much time on what we call visual acuity. Yes. And just like paying attention to all the little signs. What are her eyes doing? What do her lips look like? What is the color in her cheeks? What is her vagina doing? Is it swollen? Is it not? Is it changing color? Is it opening up? Is it closed? Like, is she squint? All these things that can potentially be happening to get an idea. Yes. Of where is she at?
Just being present.
Yes.
Instead of going on autopilot.
That's the word, present.
Doing the thing that you always do. Because again, there might be a time where you've maybe you're in the middle of a lovely encounter and it's been great, but now suddenly your body is telling you need to stop. Like, it's done, even though no one's orgasmed, no one's done it, and to be able to have the courage to be able to say that to your partner and not have someone take offense to that is huge. And again, if you are the one with chronic pain, knowing yourself that you don't wait until that last second when you need to stop, so that maybe you have some gas left in the tank, that you can take care of your partner in another way, like through toys or whatever, so that they feel satisfied. Because the worst thing is, feeling like my partner isn't getting what they need because of me. So how do you communicate and get creative so that that situation doesn't happen? Because that is a huge breeding ground for resentment.
For sure. And the last one on this list is laughter and humor is important.
Uh,
This is also really important. And, Selena and I used to say all the time with any sexual encounter at all to just, be lighthearted about it. Like,
oh
we used to
yeah,
tell people, don't be afraid to fail. Like, try all the crazy stuff. And if you fall over, if you hit your head, if you fall out of bed, just laugh about it. Go, okay, that
absolutely.
didn't work. What else can we try?
I feel like any great sexual encounter needs to have at least one like deep guffaw belly laugh. Just, I mean, it's just human bodies. They're just so weird. Like
They make funny noises. They do strange things,
it's not a big deal. Everyone's does. A former partner of mine literally would just be like, they're just bodies. It's just a body. And it literally, that statement just took so much judgment off of that I had been putting on my own body for so long. And it's just, we take stuff way too seriously. Just gonna say it.
Yes, we do. And not just when it comes to sex and everything else in
Yeah.
life as
And
well.
again, remember, laughter, just like orgasm, floods your body with really good chemicals that reduce pain and inflammation and things like that. So it is good for you to laugh.
Mm-hmm. All right. So we have covered, let's see, how to date,
Mhm.
right? Then how to start the intimacy. And then the next level after that is go back to the beginning of the show and then review all the stuff on how to handle when you're already in a relationship
Absolutely.
because you're dating, you're intimate, now you're in a relationship, now
Mhm.
you go to kind of that step. So it kind of comes full circle
Yep.
that way. A few last quick things just to go over here. We have some additional considerations as the relationship
Yes.
grows, right? So be open to change because this may change,
Absolutely.
right? Uh, Prepare for how to deal with resentments. We've kind of talked about that a little bit throughout the show already. Come up with alternative strategies for getting your needs met,
Mhm.
something else that we also covered a little bit. And make sure to reassure your partner about your commitment.
Yes.
We literally started the show with that one,
I
and
know.
we're ending the
It's a
show with that
perfect
one
way to end it.
because it is so, so important.
It is. It's as much as every human being needs that reassurance, those of us with chronic pain, it's just, it's such a gift that you as a partner can give it.
Indeed. Okay, so the last thing here is, what to do if you need help with this, if you're really having a difficult time managing this, because it can be quite challenging, let's be honest. Hopefully you've learned some skills from listening to this show, but maybe you need more support. What else can you do?
I mean, you can always hire a coach. That's someone, whether you are in a group coaching or in a one-to-one, someone that you trust that knows what you're going through can give you some really good insights and ideas that you might not have thought of yet.
Yeah, so you can hire a coach, which is a great idea, especially, somebody like you, like when your coach has personal experience in the thing that they're coaching, which honestly they always should,
Oh my God, yes.
regardless of what they're coaching,
Yes.
right? But if you can find somebody like that, like you're going to get way better than just here's what the textbooks say, here's what the psychological books say that you should do. You're going to know
Absolutely.
here's what really works.
I've had all of my partners up to date have been healthy for the most part. And they have all told me, like, as much as I live with you and I see you and I talk with you every day, I still do not understand what it feels like
No.
to be you, to have what you have. There's no way any of us can step in the other person's shoes truly and feel that. And so, yes, to have someone who knows what it is that you're going through is an invaluable resource.
Some other things you can do, you can seek a support group.
Mhm.
There are support groups out there for usually
Absolutely.
more around specific conditions,
Yes.
right? But those are great places to go.
Absolutely.
And are there any other support options that people might have other than that?
I mean, truly, I always point people within because the body and is just a reflection of your mind. I mean, there are some things that are biologically based and no matter what, they're genetic, like there's no mind body connection, but I would say the vast majority of things are connected to your thoughts, your spiritual beliefs, like how you are in the world. And so start diving into some of those aspects of yourself that you might have been ignoring up until this point, any personal development resources that call to you, any books, because as you start learning more and more about yourself, your body will reflect that. Like yes, I still have chronic pain. I cannot tell you the difference between when it started and now. It is night and day of me being actually able to be a productive member of society and a happy person. And, like you can still have a very happy, fulfilling, productive life with chronic pain. And that's the thing that I tell everyone, because I can't guarantee anyone that they'll ever feel better. I don't have any control over that. That's them, that's their body, but I can help them become a more joyful person with the pain.
Yeah. All right. Fantastic advice. Why don't you tell the listeners where they could find more from you if they were interested in potentially working with you?
Yes. So my website is just my name, emilyshaules.com, and I'm sure you'll put a link there.
There is a link in the description.
My last name is weird. And then also on Instagram, shift.yourself is where you can find me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. That was a great conversation. Some really great tips in there. So if anybody is dealing with anything like this, I really hope that you learned something from it. And, when we do these shows, we do our best to give you as much as we can. And we know that in an hour show, we can't give you everything, right? But hopefully this kind of at least prop the door open a little bit for you to go, oh, there are other ways to handle this. There are other things that can be done.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, if it's piqued your interest and this is something you're dealing with, for sure, dive in deeper and learn as much as you can about it, because it doesn't have to be the end of your world or the end of your life or the end of your relationship.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks for being on the show again, Emily. All right, everybody. That's all the time I have for this episode, and I will see you next week. We hope you like this episode of the Love Lab podcast. If you enjoy this show, subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with your friends.
And for more free, exclusive content, join us in the Passion Vault at CelineRemy.com/vault. That's CelineRemy.com/vault.
Thanks for listening.
And remember, you're amazing.